Wild Flame, along with about 10 other Houndour, were out hunting. One of them had scented Stantler, and Blazefang had sent them to catch prey for the rest of the pack. The smaller group was following the strong scent of the Stantler herd, which had been there not too long ago. Wild Flame was the first one to spot the deer-like Pokemon ahead, and the Houndour pack spread out, singling out the Stantler furthest from the main herd. Before anyone could move further, one of the other Stantler lifted its head and charged toward where Boneclaw was hiding, sending the Houndour scurrying for cover. A few other Houndour raced toward it, surrounding the creature and allowing Boneclaw to escape. The Stantler backed away with an alarmed look in its eyes, but a moment later, the rest of the herd came dashing toward them. "Move out of the way!" Wild Flame shouted. "Come back and circle any stragglers." The Houndour bolted in different directions. They had all had experience with Stantler before. Most of the stampeding ones were probably just illusions, but Wild Flame wasn't taking any chances. The Stantler herd thundered past, and Wild Flame ordered the pack to follow them. As she raced after the rest of the Houndour, one of the larger, tougher Stantlers suddenly leaped in front of her, bringing his hooves smashing down into her side. Wild Flame let out a yelp as she was forcefully knocked off her feet and into a tangle of bushes. She looked around wildly, but the pack had already left, chasing after the rest of the herd. She was alone. There was no way one single Houndour could bring down a Stantler, and this one seemed bent on killing her to protect his herd from a future attack. Wild Flame barely managed to avoid another stomp of the beast's hooves. She got to her feet, knowing there was no choice but to fight. After being kicked by the Stantler, she knew she couldn't outrun him in this state, doing the only thing she could think of at the moment. Wild Flame used a smog attack. Thick smoke filled the air, hiding the Stantler from view. Hoping it would be blinded by the attack, Wild Flame started to limp off. However, it wasn't enough. The Stantler came charging toward her through the billowing smoke, rage filling its eyes. Wild Flame saw in that look a hatred for her kind and for predators. She was unable to escape as the Stantler charged toward her with a powerful takedown, lowering his horns as he slammed Wild Flame forcefully to the ground. The Houndour lay prone to the leafy earth, hearing the worried cries of her packmates. They now knew she was in danger, but she would probably be dead before they could come to her rescue. With her last bit of strength, she painfully tried to stand up, and to her surprise, she did. For some strange reason, she was able to stand firmly, no longer feeling as if she were about to faint. The smog had seemed to clear away a bit as well. Or was it getting lighter? Wild Flame realized then that the light, the glow, was coming from herself. The Stantler was charging toward her again, and with a snarl, Wild Flame leaped at him. Her legs and paws already starting to lengthen and become much slimmer, her claws growing larger and more curved. Her muzzle was also becoming longer, her teeth even more sharp and deadly. Horns curved back behind her head as she struck the Stantler, sinking her teeth around its neck. She could feel her tail grow long and thin, ending in an arrow-shaped point. The glow faded a moment later, leaving a newly evolved Houndoom clinging to the enraged Stantler with teeth and claws. Wild Flame felt the hooves pounding into her stomach, but she was much larger and stronger now. Releasing the Pokemon, Wild Flame landed on all fours, breathing heavily, but with the wild light of battle in her eyes. Leaping at the Stantler again, Wild Flame locked her jaws around its throat, hoping for a swift kill. A brief struggle ensued, and the two collapsed in the dirt. A moment later, Wild Flame stood up shakily, her prey lying at her feet. She had done it. Relief and shock flooded over her. She was astonished at what she had done. Taking down a large prey Pokemon on her own was something she would have thought was impossible. She could hear the sounds of her pack coming closer. Wild Flame lifted her head and gave a few barking cries, a signal to the rest of the hunting pack. As the other Houndour approached, exhaustion overcame Wild Flame, and she collapsed in a heap. It was hard to tell who was more surprised, Volko or Snowcrystal. The Quilava just stared back at the growlithe for a few seconds, but quickly moved past being startled. Dashing towards Snowcrystal, he plowed her into the side of the fence with quick attack. Spark leapt to his friend's rescue, striking Volko with Thunderbolt and sinking his fangs into the Quilava's leg. The two Pokemon struggled in the dust, and as Rosie and Stormblade appeared, Volko's trainer did as well, stepping from around the corner of a concrete wall. Glancing toward the Pokemon, the man gave a cry of shock for two reasons. One, a Scyther he believed was his was loose and standing right by the fence. Two, there was a Growlithe recovering from one of his Quilava's quick attacks that had white fur. Volko, Flame Wheel. Thunder, get the others, the trainer shouted. Volko leaped away from Spark as the flames on his head and back flared up. Opening his mouth wide, he fired a whirling tornado of flames at his attacker. Spark nimbly leapt out of the way, His back fur only singed, and instantly turned his pelt to spines before whipping around and firing a large amount of them at the attacking Quilava's face. Volko gave a shriek of pain as the sharp spines embedded themselves in his face and chest. Pawing furiously at them, the Quilava didn't hear his trainer's next orders. Volko's trainer now focused his attention on Stormblade, glaring at the Scyther through the darkness. Thunder! Move! Stormblade stood still, confused, and the human stepped closer, peering at him through the gloom. It was only then that he realized that this wasn't his Scyther. Giving a cry of frustration, he reached for one of the Pokeballs hooked to his belt. A hint of alarm flashed across his face as he did so, as if he was remembering that he didn't have any more of his most trusted Pokemon with him. Nevertheless, he grabbed one of the round objects and threw it. Red Claw, go! A massive shape materialized in front of Spark and the others. It bore a strong resemblance to Snowcrystal, only it was much larger. It had a longer mane and thicker stripes, as well as 2 fangs that stuck out of its mouth. Unlike Snowcrystal, however, the Arcanine had bright, vivid orange fur and stripes as black as tar, strikingly different from the pale gray of Snowcrystal's own stripes. Red flame-like shapes had also been painted on the Arcanine's claws, or perhaps, Snowcrystal thought with a jolt, it was meant to represent blood. Unlike Volko, who looked healthy and well-fed, the Arcanine was gaunt and thin, the marks of a whip clearly evident along its back. It bore several wounds, as if many Pokemon had tried to attack it over weeks or days. It also wore a strange collar that emitted several sparks every few seconds. The Arcanine looked even more wounded and malnourished than the trainer's Scyther, who, from what the man had said, seemed to be called Thunder. Red Claw, the man ordered. Attack that other Scyther, and don't let the Growlithe escape. Red Claw gave a loud roar, though it seemed less than enthusiastic, and charged towards Stormblade, launching a flamethrower in the Scyther's direction. Stormblade leaped aside, and at a command from his trainer, Red Claw fired the same attack again, this time as Stormblade dodged. The flame seared across his shoulder. When he landed on his feet again, he could see the Arcanine with his mouth open wide, fangs gleaming, and a faint red glow at the back of the dog-like Pokemon's throat, growing steadily brighter. Stormblade, knowing what was coming, quickly darted behind a concrete wall just as Red Claw shot a blast of flame in his direction, feeling the heat of the attack as it blazed past him. Meanwhile, Volko had recovered and was now battling against Snowcrystal, Spark, and Rosie. As the Quilava shot another flame wheel at Spark, who managed to dodge but escaped with a burned paw, Rosie's eyes started to glow as she focused them on Volko. The Quilava's eyes glazed over a bit, giving him a dazed and confused look. He tried to fire another flame wheel, which collided with the concrete wall instead of hitting Rosie, who was in the opposite direction. Volko stumbled around to face his opponents again, shaking his head to try and clear his thoughts. Spark struck him with another thunderbolt, and the Quilava sank to the ground, the confused ray's effects fading away, but all too late. The trainer cursed under his breath and immediately returned to Quilava before Snowcrystal's jaws could clamp around his front leg. At the same time, Volko was returned. Stormblade found himself face to face with Red Claw, both of them seeming reluctant to attack. Red Claw now seemed exhausted and weak, dreading the thought of having to go on, and Stormblade couldn't find it in himself to attack him. Red Claw, fire blast that bug, the Arcanine's trainer shouted. Red Claw seemed to flinch at the command, then began charging up the attack. Stormblade leapt out of the way as Red Claw launched a fire blast, but he needn't have bothered. The attack was a miss, plowing into the ground to the right side of the Scyther. Red Claw began panting for breath, his whole body visibly shaking. Stormblade left him as he ran up to help his friends, who were now fighting against a Skarmory that Volko's trainer had sent out. Their fire attacks had clearly weakened the emaciated Pokemon, but nevertheless it was still fighting, a look of insane rage in its eyes as it tried to claw at Snowcrystal's back. The Growlithe managed to duck down and avoid the worst of the blow, but a few of the claws caught on her skin, leaving bright red cuts that stood out strikingly against her soft white fur. "Stop it!" Stormblade cried, rushing towards the others. "He'll only send out one Pokemon after another. Don't attack the Pokemon. It isn't their fault. We just need to get out of here." Rosie nodded, but knowing that the trainer would only follow them, she fused her Confuse Ray once again, on the Skarmory this time, and she and the others took off, running past Stormblade and towards the woods. The Skarmory gave a cry of rage and shot after Stormblade as he turned to follow the others. The Steel-type flew low to the ground, trying to rake the Scyther's back with its claws. Stormblade shook the Pokemon off, not wanting to attack it in this weakened state, as it had obviously been trained in a cruel way purely to fight again and again. Like the Arcanine, it looked as if it had been used as a punching bag for some incredibly strong Pokemon. The Skarmory shrieked as it plowed into Stormblade, sending the Scyther crashing into the ground. The armored bird Pokemon leaped into the air again, ready to swoop down at the stunned bug type. Redclaw and his trainer came dashing toward the two, watching as the Skarmory swiped its razor-edged wing feathers at Stormblade's face. Stormblade blocked the blow with his blade and, knowing that there was no other option, lashed out with both sides at the Skarmory's chest. However, it seemed to do little damage to the steel Pokemon. A moment later, the Skarmory had him pinned down, its claws scraping against his shoulders. The trainer watching the fight took an empty Pokeball from his belt. "All right, Redclaw, finish him off." He looked a bit less unsettled, casting a look back at the abandoned gym building before returning his gaze to the battle. Redclaw darted toward the fight, a bright glow coming from his muzzle. He then blasted the flames, not at Stormblade, but at the Skarmory. The steel Pokemon gave a cry of pain and collapsed, allowing Stormblade to struggle to his feet. As the Skarmory recovered, Redclaw stared into the Scyther's eyes, ignoring his trainer's sudden cries. The Arcanine shot a quick look back at the man who was making a break for the gym building. "Get out of here," the Fire-type shouted at Stormblade. "Go away, and don't come back. He's getting his other Pokemon, the really strong ones, and you'll never win a battle against them." The roar of some chained-up Pokemon from within the gym building seemed to shake the ground beneath their feet, and Redclaw's voice grew low and desperate. "Please, you don't want him to catch you. You deserve a better life than this, friend." Stormblade stood back in shock for a moment, exhausted from the battle. He realized that this Arcanine was grateful to him for his refusal to fight back, and that the Arcanine probably got beaten by his opponents quite often. Knowing there was nothing more he could do for the fire Pokemon, he nodded and flew off towards the forest, following his fleeing friends. Watching him leave, Redclaw bowed his head as his trainer returned, several new Pokeballs clasped in his hand. The man caught up with him, furious that the group of wild Pokemon had already faded into the nighttime gloom of the trees. He knew that he could send out a search, but it would be all but useless in wilderness like this during the night. Redclaw also knew that the man would never trust him enough to try to force him to track them down after what he'd done. The trainer swore under his breath, lowering his hands and clenching the Pokeball tighter as he looked out into the thick forest. Redclaw knew what was coming, but he didn't care. He had done what was right. He had helped that Scyther, and he had denied his trainer a new group of Pokemon, as well as a rare-colored growlithe that he would have sold in one of the cities, and that, in itself, was a victory. Spark cried out in pain as he collapsed, exhausted, in the middle of the forest before starting to lick his burned forepaw. Snowcrystal slumped to the ground next to him, the claw wounds on her back still bleeding a bit. Rosie luckily was unscathed. She approached the others timidly, whispering, "What about my Firestone?" "Rosie," Snowcrystal whispered, "I think that human used the Firestone on that Arcanine." Rosie glanced toward the ground sadly, and to Snowcrystal's shock, she could see the Vulpix blinking away tears. "You were all really brave, though," she said softly, as if it took a bit of effort to say. Snowcrystal was about to reply when Stormblade came staggering into the clearing. Apart from the burn on his shoulder, he didn't have any noticeable wounds, but he looked incredibly tired. Stormblade sat down beside a tree, panting, as the others tried to recover from the effects of the battle. "We shouldn't have gone in there," Spark whispered at last. "You were right, Stormblade." "Well, we're alive, aren't we?" Stormblade replied. "And we did get to help that other Scyther." "Yes," Snowcrystal agreed, standing up. "But we'd better get going. That human could be looking for us. Come on." Rosie stood up and plodded after Snowcrystal, Spark limping beside her. Stormblade rose to his feet and followed, and Snowcrystal could tell by his slightly awkward movements that his shoulder was bothering him. She was surprised when Rosie spoke up in a helpful-sounding voice. "You know, there's some raspberries over there. If you and Spark eat them, it will help your burns to not get infected, and maybe even heal a bit faster." She motioned toward a berry bush nearby, and Spark and Stormblade, as well as Snowcrystal and Rosie herself, ate a few before carrying on. The trainer's Scyther had never felt so much freedom. Ever since she had been freed, she had spent nearly an hour running and flying all around the forest, just for the sheer joy of being able to do it. The long chain still attached to her arm had gotten tangled in bushes and brambles at times, but she had hardly noticed. She was free. The Scyther had not known freedom for as long as she could remember, having been raised by her trainer from a young age. Her life before that was a blur. Whether or not she had had a name then, she wasn't sure. She had always gone by the nickname her trainer had given her. Thunder. At last, Thunder became so exhausted she had to stop and rest. No matter how much she wanted to keep running on, it was so different from being chained to a wall all day, as her trainer tended to do to her often, or being stuck inside a Pokeball. However, one of the things that did get Thunder to finally stop her constant wandering was a nearby stream. The moment she saw it, she darted over, plunging her head into the stream and drinking as much of the cool, clean water as it took to quench her thirst. She was amazed. All this water was right there, and no one was around to tell her how much she was allowed to drink. She could come here to the stream again and again, as much as she wanted, and her master would never know. Master. Thunder became suddenly wary. Her trainer was sure to come after her with his other Pokemon. She couldn't stay here, but she could find another forest, and another water stream like this one. Once she had finished drinking, Thunder headed deeper into the trees, not bothering to look for danger and fearing nothing and no one. No one but Master. Snowcrystal was glad Stormblade hadn't been hurt badly and could still fly. The small cut on his wing from the changed Scyther's attack didn't bother him much, and he could still use his wings just fine. He had just flown above the foliage and come back to tell them, to everyone's great relief, that they were nearly out of the forest and that a vast, grassy plain lay beyond. In spite of their wounds, the group eagerly traveled onward. The cuts across Snowcrystal's back still stung, but they had stopped bleeding, and she knew that the Berries would help Stormblade and Spark heal well. The trees seemed to thin out as the group got further, and Snowcrystal sighed with relief as she realized that they really didn't have to go far. Movement up ahead caught her eye, and she realized that the same Scyther they'd helped before, the one the trainer had mentioned was named Thunder, had flown to the forest floor ahead of them, looking completely exhausted. The moment she saw the group, Thunder jumped toward them with the intention to attack, but stopped herself when she realized who they were. "What are you still doing here?" Stormblade asked her, astonished. "You should be far away from this forest." "I will be," Thunder replied simply. "But I don't know where to go. Maybe Master's Pokemon will try and find me. I don't know these lands well." Spark gave Snowcrystal a confused glance, but they both knew that what Thunder meant by Master was her trainer. Snowcrystal decided to talk to the strange Scyther herself. "We don't know these lands either," the Growlithe explained. "I'm on a journey. I'm traveling to find Articuno." She was surprised when Thunder didn't show any interest in the legendary's name being mentioned. "Stormblade, this Scyther, and Spark, this Jolteon, are looking for a new home," she continued. "And I'm sure Rosie is too. If you want, you can come with us. You shouldn't be wandering alone when you're injured." "I'm not injured," Thunder replied, though Snowcrystal could plainly see that that was a blatant lie. From the look on Snowcrystal's face, Thunder could tell what she was thinking. "I am not injured," she repeated. "Master was not very angry with me. He did not hurt me much. If Master was very angry, I would be injured now. But I'm not." Spark and Snowcrystal exchanged puzzled looks again, not understanding how the Scyther could regard her wound as nothing. However, they decided not to question her on the subject. "So, do you want to come with us?" Snowcrystal asked. "After all, Stormblade and Spark are looking for the same thing you should be looking for. A safe, new home." Thunder shrugged. "I guess so," she replied. "I don't know whether Master's Pokemon are searching for me, but I will come with you. For a little while." Snowcrystal happily nodded, and the group headed off. Snowcrystal couldn't help but notice how Spark and Stormblade were still limping. Their wounds, although minor, were obviously bothering them. Thunder, however, moved swiftly and easily, as if she wasn't injured at all. Only the look in her eye gave away that she was in pain, and even then it was hard to tell. Snowcrystal sighed. They were certainly becoming an odd group of adventurers, but at least they would be working together if any danger happened to come their way.